time. So we'll go ahead and kick off with the CVC Exchange Financial Aid. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mackenzie Johnson, and I'm the Platform Management and Support Supervisor. But today here with us, we also have other members of the CVC team that I would like to introduce. So Mike, I'll turn over to you first if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Vogt. I'm the Director for Information Technology at the California Virtual Campus.
Thanks,
Andrea.
Mike. Yes, please, Andrea.
Hi, all. I'm Andrea Hanstein, the Director of Communications and Partnerships.
Great. Thanks, Mike and Andrea, for joining us today. We are going to be going through a presentation going over the functionality of financial aid within the CVC Exchange. But as you have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. We will also have time at the end to discuss any other topics at length. So with that, we will jump right in. Here are the topics that we will review for the financial aid functionality today. Primarily, we're going to look at the student journey and where the student essentially will request financial aid or some of the other reimbursement options that we offer them. And then the admin dashboard. On the admin side of that, we're going to go in and dive in how you can see which students have requested financial aid, both through the enrollments tab, as well as the financial aid dashboard. And we'll go into that more specifically for those of you either that have currently been working with that financial aid dashboard or those that may be new or wanting to learn more about that. And then, of course, plenty of time for support and questions. So first, let's dive into the student support video. This is going to be available as a resource with some of the other resources we'll share at the end. But what we'll do is we migrate into this video. It's a few minutes long, but what I will skip to is when the student has actually registered for a course through the CVC Exchange, and then what options they're shown for payment and reimbursement. And then if you want to see the remainder of the other parts of that video, you can view our other trainings as well. So here the student has started at our website. They are going to log in with their home college, and they're going to access their dashboard and their profile if needed. Then they're going to search for courses, as we can see here. Oh, let me make that full video for you. They're going to search for courses. They're going to select a course and say add course. Consents here. Complete this enrollment form, where we will then process the enrollment and the registration, where the student will then be taken to this congratulations page. And this is what I want to focus on, as well as our admin dashboard today. So when the student has successfully registered for a course at a teaching college through the CVC Exchange, this is what they are shown. They have a course summary here on the left. They're shown IDs, as well as right here, the DSPS site for the teaching college. Right underneath that, they're shown payment. Now, we classify payment and reimbursement a little differently for students on the CVC Exchange. For the payment option, they're going to be shown what they owe for the class. And if they select pay fees, as you can see, they are going to pay for that using a credit card with the payment processor that is set up with your teaching college, or the teaching college, excuse me. Down here is where we talk about reimbursement options. So CCPG, financial aid, veterans, and this is what is shown to students. So as we dive in, the information we give to the about CCPG, whoops, went a little too fast there, is that students can apply for CCPG at both the home college and the teaching college. That is done separately. So as they say they want to pay for that course at the teaching college using CCPG, they can click that link to then follow the process for the teaching college to use CCPG there, where they may also be using it at their home college already, but this is another process for another college that needs to have that on file. And now for the bulk of what we're going to be discussing today, financial aid. This is what the information we're going to give to students again about the requirements to request financial aid, and those requests for financial aid are going to go to the student's home college, not the college where the student is enrolling into that course, but back to the home college to say, is this other course eligible for me to use my financial aid? So the student will follow the requests here. I want to request the use of financial aid. And then what we will show you are kind of the two ways that you can see if students have requested financial aid and the two ways that colleges can migrate through those requests that come through the CVC Exchange. And then we have information here about student veterans as well. So if you get student veterans, you can direct them back to their dashboard for more information. But of course, we will share information about our resources as well as student resources at the end of this presentation as well. After this, again, the student has enrolled in the course. So they're going to navigate back to their dashboard where they can see the course here. And they can also, again, see the option to pay for that course using their credit card, excuse me, or they can go back to that course details page, that congratulations page, to see the financial aid options again. One of the bigger or most common questions we get from admins as well as students is, how do I get back to that financial aid request, right? Because if you go to your dashboard, the student goes to their dashboard, they don't necessarily see that. So they need to click that details page, which will take them back to that congratulations. Any questions on the student part of that journey about what the student is seeing for financial aid before we dive into a little bit more on the admin side? Great. Okay, so the next slide I wanted to show here is just a slide of those reimbursement options again. So then you don't have to watch this recording necessarily to have access to what students see. Now we do update this language as needed. So again, we will keep this updated in our training materials, but just know that this is the information that students can go find. Another one here is the student journey workflow. This is more for just your general information. This isn't something that you need to know or study, anything like that, but it does show all of the different points where our students, where we're looking for certain endpoints for those students, including payment and including other validations. So if this is something that you are interested in or want for your college, this is something that you can take a look into as well. All right, now what we're going to dive into today for the primary part of our presentation is diving into the admin dashboard for the CVC Exchange. So we looked at the student side. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at that admin side. And we're going to look at two components. Many of you may already be familiar with this. Some of you may be being implemented with the CVC Exchange, becoming familiar with this, or maybe just need a review. But what we'll talk about is that enrollment details report, that enrollments tab, which is where you can access both student payment information, as well as if generally they've requested financial aid, which is very helpful. And then actually going into the financial aid request dashboard. So we'll talk about those a little bit separately and the requirements to be set up to kind of review those. Great. Whoops, let me have our presentation here. Okay, so we are in the test environment for purposes of what we're looking at today, just so we're not showing other student data, especially as we're looking at financial aid. But for us to go and review these tabs again, enrollments and financial aid requests. Let's dive into enrollments first. Many of you, again, may be familiar with this for other reporting purposes, but if we just wanted to highlight a few key components as you're going through and looking for student information. First, for selecting a student status, understanding if the student has dropped, if they are registered, if they're looking for some kind of pending validation or prerequisite request, that is where you can find the student status. And if you select this legend, it'll pull up descriptions of all of those statuses as well. We monitor the student errors, of course, and we'll reach out to your college as we see those occurring. However, you always have access to that. Your admissions teams, your implementation teams have access to that as needed. What I want to highlight, though, is again what we've talked about, the financial aid component. So without even needing to select a student status, I can select a term, also known as a session. Let's say we want to look at fall 2025. Now what you have to do is select this other filters option, and then down here you'll see requested financial aid. If I select that and filter, it will show me all of the students. Right now I'm looking at all home colleges and teaching colleges, but this will filter down for your college based on your permissions. But if I'm looking for any students that have requested financial aid for the fall term at any college in our test environment, there are 19 students here. Now, some of them have dropped the courses. They did request financial aid, but now they've dropped, or now they are still registered. But this is a great way to be able to pull a report to see those students. If you also don't want to go in and click on the student details for each one, you can download that report by clicking here, download CSV, and then use that report as needed. So that is a really helpful tip. You can also search directly by a student up here, back here at the top. If you're looking, did this student particularly request financial aid? You can look up that student by the CCC ID, the student name, or the student email. So you can feel free to take a look at those your students to see who has requested that. The other piece I wanted to point out as well is the payment status is also found under this other filters option. And so if you want to see not financial aid related, but maybe you're wanting to see, did the student already submit payment for a course? Are they waiting to submit payment for a course? What you can do is see which students are in the status for payment, who has submitted payment. And again, a legend here to explain all of those options. What I'd like to highlight, and what can kind of be confusing, is if you are using this, please note that paid is not the final status that we are looking for students. Paid means we're still waiting for a confirmation from the teaching college. So the final status that you'll want to search for is confirmed in teaching college, which we can do that here for any student in fall. And it looks like we had 44 students that successfully completed payment in that term, again, for all colleges and tests. And we could download that report if we wanted to go into more detail as well. So there's a quick overview of kind of that student side of the financial or the admin side of the enrollment side, and we're seeing what students have requested financial aid based on their registration. But now we can dive into a little bit more detail about the financial aid requests. So the financial aid request is a functionality that we can turn on for your college. About half of our colleges have this right now, where you can actually go through and approve or deny financial aid requests for your CVC Exchange students through the CVC Exchange. Now, it doesn't automatically add those credits to your SIS. That's still work that we'll review and go through. However, if you no longer want to just receive an email notification and want to then have to email that student manually, like many of our colleges have been doing, this is a great workflow to be able to use, is this financial aid request option here. So before we dive into that, I wanted to pause to see if there are any questions so far about the student side of the journey or that enrollments tab and looking up those general student reports. Any questions? Great.
There's a couple I
Oh,
want
please.
to
Please,
highlight.
Mike.
So we've answered them in the Q&A section.
Oh, great.
But one, there's a question around how long does it usually take for financial aid to go through without the student losing their spot in the course? The great question, because it kind of gets to a couple of things that occur. One is, does that teaching college have a drop for non-payment process? If that process is in place, that window will vary based on that teaching college's drop for non-payment, process. So for example, I think Citrus College, they drop at 3 different points. So you might enroll right before one of those points, in which case you maybe have a day to make payment. Or maybe you enroll 3 weeks before the next drop for non-payment date occurs. And at that point, they just look at everybody who has an outstanding balance on their account and then drops them. So it varies greatly, and there's not a great visibility into, well, I cross-enrolled to this college, so how long do I have to pay? So that's kind of problem number one. Some colleges, it might be really, really short. They might say, well, every student, regardless of when they enroll, they have 3 days to pay or they get dropped. Other colleges don't even have a drop for non-payment policy, so there really is no time frame. Students have all the time in the world to get aid from their home college if they're eligible, and then make that payment to the teaching college. So I always hate to say it varies, but that is the most accurate statement I can think of, because it's just not consistent across the entire system. Now, that said, most home colleges actually do follow a similar rule when it comes to processing timelines. They process around the start of their term. So they're not processing financial aid requests as they come in. So say you're enrolling over the summer, you might enroll in June or July for a fall class at another college. Your home college probably isn't going to be processing that aid request until the start of their term, which might be in late August or September. So that means that, if you're a student and you're enrolling at teaching college, now the drop for non-payment, you're probably not even going to find out your financial aid status for that request until much, much later, at which time you will have already been dropped from that course. So I know it's confusing and it's challenging, but I wanted to outline this is kind of the different scenarios that play out, drop for non-payment policy, the teaching college and home college processing times on requests are all over the place. So that was a great question. And then there was one other I wanted to also address.
On that, Mike, I want to say that is a
Yeah.
great question, and why we highlight on our side the CVC Exchange, and we encourage students to pay if they can. We understand why the students are requesting financial aid. We understand that this is an issue, and we're trying to address that as best we can, like Mike said. However, we make it clear to students that if you need to pay for this course to avoid being dropped for non-payment, and then financial aid, CCPG, can be a reimbursement. But Mike, yeah, I wanted to say that, and before you move on, yeah.
And then there was another question. If the student clicks, I want to pay using the CCPG, prompts them to fill out teaching college's CCPG application. Is that correct? Yes, it does. That is correct. We send them the teaching college's application process, whatever that is. So that some teaching colleges use the state CCPG form, but not many. Most actually require the student to submit a FAFSA. So they will ask the student to add that institution to their FAFSA if they have a FAFSA already on file for that academic year. So but it's always CCPG is always going to the teaching college, and it's always following the teaching college's existing CCPG request process. So if that college says, hey, all of our students use the state form for the CCPG, or all of our students at FAFSA, that's what we're sending us to do. And then the last question was someone was asking about, can we see what the student sees when they click on one of those options? And I can demonstrate that real quick. I've got a test student pulled up here if we want.
Great. Yeah,
absolutely. Screen.
Yep. Let me stop my share there.
And then we can jump right back in. So I am logged in as a student who's actually a non-resident. So they are out of state. They're paying an out-of-state tuition rate, and they have cross-enrolled to a class. And so this student actually only has these two options. They have the pay fees option, which if I click on that, it's going to take them to a payment page where this is the teaching college's payment processor that they're going to use. I wanted to touch on payment real quick because that comes up a lot with financial aid, because we are prompting students still, even if you get financial aid. If you're getting the CCPG, that's the best, because then your fee is just waived and you don't have to pay at all. But if you're getting financial aid from your home college, the student does still have to go pay, because they're getting that aid, but the college isn't just sending the aid to the other college, they're giving it to the student to then give to the college. So they still have to come back and click on this page, which brings them over here to that payment page for that college. So you can see it's Grossmont Coimacca branded. This money is going directly to Grossmont. CVC doesn't hold it. We don't touch it at all. So this is integrated directly with that college's payment processor. It hits their bank account at the end of every day. And then we post this amount that the student pays. We do post that to the student account ledger at Grossmont on their record at Grossmont. So that's all that we're doing. It's just that the student paid, the money went to the college bank, but we're going to tell the college student information system that money is posted. So we'll post that 771 to the student record at Grossmont. So that's how a student would pay. Back here. And I'm just going to go back to my dashboard and then jump into details again. So this is back to that page where the student can pay or request financial aid. So if they click on this button, we do require them to complete this financial aid request consent form. And this mirrors what a lot of college consent forms are if they're doing paper consortiums or one-to-one consortiums for financial aid. It's the same kind of language. It's I've enrolled in a class that meets my educational plan. I have a FAFSA and so on. Now, a lot of these students actually don't have a FAFSA, so they're just they may or may not be reading this very carefully. But I'm just going to go ahead and click that, and then once they hit that button, they'll see this this message. So that when they go back, they'll see that they've already requested financial aid, and they can always cancel that request if they're like, you know what, I'm going to drop this class, or I realize I'm not enrolled in 6 units at my home college. I'm not really eligible, so forget about it. Never mind. But that's kind of what it looks like from the student side when they're actually click on that button to request aid from their home college. So stop share.
Very
Hopefully that's
helpful.
helpful.
Very helpful, and a great transition into now where those requests go. So I think it's very helpful to see what the student actually does all the way through that process of, yes, I've submitted that. It's now waiting somewhere with the home college. So before we even dive into that, talking about kind of the 2 different options. So for home colleges that are on what we call more a manual financial aid process, when that student submits that financial aid request, in that example, Napa Valley College would get an email saying this student has requested financial aid. Please review this and inform the student if this was accepted, denied. And that's a process put on the home college to do that. And then there's nothing in our CVC Exchange that lets us know if that student requested, was approved. That's all just kind of happening manually at that home college. What we have now is this financial aid dashboard. And this is a workflow that we can turn on for your home college. So again, about half of our colleges right now have it turned on. Many are kind of, waiting for that next round of approvals. But if we dive into the financial aid request dashboard, you'll be able to see, sorry about that, you'll be able to see students that have requested and been granted financial aid based on a workflow that we're about to go into. So with this new, what we're calling financial aid workflow, what would happen is that the student is submits that request for financial aid, and then a counselor, is whoever is assigned as a counselor at that home college for financial aid, would receive a notification to go review that request in the CVC Exchange dashboard, which will review that. After that, it's sent to the financial aid director to approve. If the counselor, approves that workflow, it's sent to the financial aid director for final approval. And then if that's approved, we notify the student from the CVC Exchange to say your financial aid has been accepted. Here's this information. And then that way it's not more of a manual process for our home colleges. So to actually walk through those, we are going to go through the 2 different sides that I talked about for this workflow, the counselor side and then the director side to actually see what those approvals are. So this is already available to our colleges, but we are going to go ahead and watch this. Just a short, about 2 minutes or so to watch what the counselor would see as a request would come in through this workflow. And then we'll watch another one to see what that financial aid director would see in the second part of that workflow. And then we'll be able to answer questions. There we go. Oh, what I may not have though, I may not have shared my volume. Let me make sure I did that. Should be a default for Zoom, but hello, and welcome to the quick overview training for financial aid requests as a counselor at your college for the CVC Exchange. In this short video, we will review how you can approve or deny financial aid requests from students and how these requests will then move on to your financial aid director for final approval. To get started, log into your CVC Exchange admin account, and then to access the financial aid request dashboard, you will need to have been assigned a counselor role at your college. Once you have that permission, you can access the dashboard by clicking financial aid requests. This is in our staging environment, but your production environment will look similar. Once in the dashboard, you can search by student, the home university, term, or status, or all of the above. Ultimately, as a counselor, you will want to search by the requested status. That will show you the list of students that have requested financial aid that you need to review. I have a test student from Napa Valley College that I have put into staging so we can see what that process looks like. And if you see here at the bottom, we have a whole list of students from Napa Valley College who have requested financial aid. And since I have counselor permissions for Napa Valley College in our staging environment, I can review these requests. So if we were to review these requests, you will see the student information here at the top. You will also see potential transfer information for the course underneath the census date. This is not pulled in staging, but it will be pulled into your production environment. However, ultimately, what you are wanting to do is at the bottom of the page where it says financial aid request counselor review. What you will want to select is either yes or no to answer the question of if this course meets the student's program of study. You will also want to leave the appropriate comments so anyone else that reviews this request will know why you reached that decision. And then once you click submit, this student will move into either a counselor approved status or a counselor denied status, which your financial aid director will then review. The student will only receive a notification after the financial aid director approves or denies the request as the final step. But that's it. So please let us know if you have any other questions by emailing support@cvc.edu, and have a great day. All right, so that is our video for our counselors for kind of that first step of that financial aid workflow. And again, counselors are looking at requested from students for their college. They either deny or approve, and then the approved ones move on to that financial aid director step, which we're now going to see in this next video as well. Unfortunately, you do have to listen to me talk again, but that does kind of walk you through the different parts of this workflow in just under a couple minutes. Hello, and welcome to the quick overview training for financial aid requests as a financial aid director at your college for the CVC Exchange. In this short video, we will show you how you can approve or deny financial aid requests that your counselors have reviewed. To get started, log into your CVC Exchange admin account as shown here. Next, you can view the financial aid request for your college by clicking on Financial Aid Requests. This is our staging environment, but this will mimic your production environment. So once in the dashboard, you can search by a specific student, your home university, the term, or status. The two statuses that you want to be concerned with are counselor approved and counselor denied. Those will show you all of the requests that you next need to review. As an example student, I will show you Napa Valley College and a student who has been counselor approved, which we can see here. So when we review the request, you will see the student information here at the top, as well as potential course transfer information underneath the course census date. However, ultimately, what you are wanting to do is here at the bottom of the page, you will see that the counselor in staging has approved this course. It meets the program of study, and they left approved comments. Your next step is to look at the financial aid request review and either approve or deny the request and leave your appropriate comments. Comments will be emailed and viewable to the student on their student dashboard. So once you click submit, that student will be notified, and that's it. So please let us know if you have any other questions about this new financial aid process by emailing support@cvc.edu, and have a great rest of your day. All right, and that is back for our financial aid directors. And again, these videos, this information, as well as workflows and decision trees are available to administrators that want to opt in to using this financial aid workflow. For those that don't, you are still welcome to use that manual process where a student says, I would like to use financial aid, and then you get those email requests. That is perfectly fine, but in this financial aid dashboard, it allows you as well as our team to be able to see what students have requested and maybe which students are still pending, which could be helpful in the student registration processes as well. So I wanted to pause there for questions and diving into specifically counselor, financial aid director roles, or anything about this workflow. Are there questions about that we'd like to go into? Perfect. That means it was super clear. We love that. So, and I truly mean that. The colleges that have decided to use this, once we say, hey, these are the folks, we want to be your counselors, and they say, yep, this is our financial aid director, we get those in there. The actual workflow works very well. And again, helps notify students in a more automated way. All right. The other piece I wanted to point out is the financial aid information that we show to students on our homepage. So if you remember back at the student journey video, at the very beginning of that video, we encourage students to start at the cvc.edu homepage, where we show them resources, course search options, as well as the login, so that they can access everything from there. But we also have a financial aid resources page here where students can go in and kind of see a lot of the similar information. It's not tailored to a specific college because, again, they're not logged into the dashboard at this point, but they can go in and read this information. Your admins also have access to this as well. All right. Moving on, the other piece I wanted to show are the support resources that we offer for both administrators and students. So we've already seen a couple of these, but I wanted to dive into a little bit more detail with a couple of them. So the first one is the college documentation page. All that financial aid documentation that I just showed, the video, the workflow, it can be found at that link here. CVC Exchange technical documentation, and if you see on the left, financial aid workflow, and you have access to all of this good information. We also have information, the full administrator guide, information about where you are maybe in the implementation process versus home college and teaching college. And then, of course, all of our recorded trainings and video. So if you do want to see that full student journey video, that's located there and it's only a couple minutes long and you can go through and see what that student is seeing. So I wanted to point that one out. Another one that's really helpful is our self-support or FAQ page. It's the same page for our students, you'll note. But if we open this, which is also found from our homepage, if you navigate, where was my homepage? Sorry about that. If we're back at the cvc.edu homepage, we can actually get to a lot of these resources right from our homepage. So you educators can click here, students can click here, but regardless, the support button will take you to those FAQ and self-support videos. This is super helpful. You can submit a ticket from here, but you can also go into this page and view help articles and videos. If you see something that would be helpful to have there or something that you want explained kind of at a general level, always let us know. We're happy to take a look at those. But students have found these pretty helpful as kind of their first step in using the CVC Exchange. All right. We went over the technical documentation, the self-support. The last piece that I will talk about is that we do have kind of two different areas of support for students versus administrators. All students and administrators have access to the chat functionality if you are just searching for courses and on that page of the CVC. Search.cvc.edu, you're looking through those courses, you can absolutely use the chat functionality that is there. But for students that are actually escalating tickets or have some kind of an issue, generally those students are sent to Parchment, who is our vendor that runs the platform, as kind of the first level of support. As those issues need escalated, they're sent to our team, our support team at CVC. However, you as administrators are welcome to email us directly at support@cvc.edu at any time. Students certainly can as well, but many of their questions can be answered by our Parchment support team as well. So we just wanted to point out why there's a difference there, but you are welcome to email us and outreach with questions at any time. All right. Now we are into the questions portion. I do see there's a little bit in chat, but Mike, Andrew, do we have questions that we wanted to review with this group?
We have a few.
Excellent.
Um,
Excellent.
So I wanted to address a quick one in chat. After it's approved, is there anything that will work with Banner or PeopleSoft to integrate those units, or will they still have to be done manually? I really wish I could say that it's some other answer than it depends, because I feel like I say that to everything, but it does. So for PeopleSoft, we do have the ability to write those units to PeopleSoft. So all PeopleSoft colleges, we have that capability. It does require an additional implementation step. So there is some work we have to do with your IT team to allow us to actually write those units, but it can be automated. So when you click approve, it would actually go add those units as remote units to the students' financial aid screens in PeopleSoft without you having to go in and do anything else. And if the student drops, it would also remove those units automatically from PeopleSoft without you having to do anything. So that's a great advantage of PeopleSoft. For Banner, we have a direct integration with some colleges in Banner, and for those colleges, we can do the same thing that we do for PeopleSoft. We can update those financial aid screens automatically and remove them automatically if the student drops. However, for Banner Ethos colleges and colleague colleges, we do not have a way to actually touch those screens right now. So there's all these APIs kind of running behind the scenes. Lucian has not exposed any APIs to update those financial aid screens separate from registration. So our hands are a little tied there for right now, but we are working with Lucian to try and find a solution to that problem. I think
Great.
Andrea summed it up well. Yeah, we're working on that
Yes.
for Ethos colleges, but for Banner Direct and PeopleSoft colleges, we do have a solution.
Great question.
One other question that came up, and I want to demonstrate real quick,
Oh,
is
please.
around CCPG. So I want to just show what that looks like for students when they request. Show you the right screen. So now I'm logged in as a student who is actually an in-state student, which you see they're being charged that in-state rate. So their fees are obviously much less. And then they also have this option for CCPG, which is actually the top option for reimbursement options. So, and you'll notice it has all this kind of directions or text in there to kind of say, here's what you do to get the CCPG at that college. And this is dynamic. So if the college is saying, no, we have the state form, this would be a state form link, and it would actually reference, the CCPG request form. But because this is the college that actually requires the FAFSA to do CCPG analysis, we provide that directions here. And then when they click on this, it's going to take them to their FAFSA page where they can log in and access their FAFSA at that college with that college teaching college code to receive their FAFSA. Now, the question that was posed was, we've had students do this and then still get dropped for non-payment. And there's two things that are driving that particular scenario. One is they might be submitting this at a college that has one of those really short crop for non-payment windows. Like I think Chaffey College has a 3-day window and Shasta College has a 3-day window. So if they've cross-enrolled to those colleges, that evaluation probably is not happening within those 3 days. And so that 3-day window is up. They still have the balance on their account. Boom, they get dropped. So that's very frustrating for the student. And we've kind of talked with Shasta and Chaffey about that. Like, can you give these students a little more time to pay, maybe, just so they, or at least submit their FAFSA? And that is kind of still being considered by colleges. I think Chaffey was like, no, they really just need to pay. They need to pay up front, out of pocket if they have to. This just isn't, it's not in, we're not really negotiating that. Shasta is still considering if they want to extend that window for CVC students alone. So sorry that if anybody's from Chaffey on this call, I'm sorry, but we have really tried, because we get this a lot from students who cross enroll, and Chaffey actually has quite a few cross enrollments. So that's scenario one, short drop window for non-payment, doesn't provide enough time for the CCPG analysis to actually be carried out. The other possibility that can be happening is the student submits their FAFSA, but the primary matching criteria for FAFSA to student record is SSN. And we don't supply the SSN as a data element when we cross-enroll a student. That comes in with the student's shared application. So, but SSN is an optional field on the CCC Apply application. So if the student didn't include it on that original application, the teaching college will never get it, which means that student has no SSN. Therefore, there's a likelihood that the FAFSA just never gets matched to the student record. So maybe that college has a really long drop for non-payment process. So if they can't match it to the student record based on SSN, it just never gets evaluated at all. So those two things could be happening when a student runs into that issue. What we recommend is, if you can have that student reach out to us, that is helpful. We can usually shepherd them through matching at the teaching college, or if it's like a really short window, we can talk to that teaching college about re-adding them now that they've been evaluated. Because if they re-add that class, that CCPG has actually been evaluated automatically and would apply, and they would automatically have their fee waived at that college. So it'd be a much smoother experience if they were re-added to the course. But we can assist with that. So please let us know, because that also helps us kind of gather that volume of how many students are getting impacted by these really short drop for non-payment windows. So just wanted to kind of touch on that, but
That's
okay.
great.
Yeah, Mike,
Maybe
can
it's some
you,
other questions. Yeah, go for it, Andrea. Mike.
I was gonna say, can you do Eugenia's and then anonymous
Yes.
attendee?
Yes. So Eugenia, thank you for waiting so patiently. I wanted to answer this live because I actually want to give you the option to come off mute. Let me find you real quick. And let's kind of talk through that a little bit more. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the specific like use case that you're outlining. So the student is enrolling close to your freeze date. But then you mentioned there's a different date that's being evaluated. And are you talking about the date the student requests the financial aid, or are you talking about the enrollment date itself?
The enrollment, because I noticed on the
Okay.
application workflow, there are different, well, I just pull out an example, but this one, it has the same date, but it's created, constant given, eligible and approved, enroll, register, and pending validation, and then at the end, the validated and register.
Yeah.
I noticed there was a student that this student created, I don't know, I believe it's the application in one date, but then it was validated in a different date. So I went by the validated and registered, but this student missed the freeze date, so it's a bit confusing. So I don't know which date is the one that I should be using.
Great question. Thank you for clarifying that, because I was going to give you a different answer. So you were using the correct date. The validated and registered date is the correct date. That's when the student actually is enrolling in the course.
Okay.
So the created date is when the student has created their AER, which could
Okay.
happen with a different enrollment. So they might have added a different class previously. That'll create their AER record in our
Okay.
system, but it doesn't actually correlate to the enrollment at that college in that class. It might be associated with another class, or a previous attempt, perhaps. And so the validated and registered date is, this was the day that we actually added that student to that class at that college. So they are enrolled as of that date.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great one, because there's different dates and different statuses floating around that admin pin. So validated and registered is always the primary one to go with.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think our next one, Mike, will students be able to edit financial aid requests, especially if they aren't currently in 6 units at their home college, but then they're denied, but then they are in the appropriate units? Is there a way to edit those requests? Are kind of the two next questions.
Not yet. So the student can cancel the request, which we do recommend if you're talking to the student, or if they're meeting with a counselor and they're like, oh, I'm not in 6 units yet, or I haven't submitted my FAFSA yet, cancel that request for now until you do those steps, and then they could reinitiate. So, but that's the most that they can edit right now. What's on our roadmap to add is the ability to actually like resubmit or appeal a financial aid request. So right now they'll submit it. The college will either have to approve or deny or just let it sit. Those are really the only 3 options the college has: is I'm taking no action, or I'm saying, yes, I approve this. No, I don't approve this. And at that point, if they approve or deny that, the train has left the station and there's really nothing the student can do at that point to say, oh, wait, I need to go do something else. So we will add a appeal process if they're denied because they had missed an eligibility requirement that they have now completed and want to then go back and say, okay, I did what you asked. You said I didn't have FAFSA. I've submitted now. Can you reevaluate this? The second thing we're doing is adding a pending status. So instead of being able to say approved, deny, or do nothing, you would actually have a fourth option of moving that student to a pending status, which allows you to message that student through our interface to say, I've reviewed your request, but you don't have FAFSA with us right now. So if you submit FAFSA, I can then move forward with this request. So that would send that note to the student. It would move them into this pending state until the student does that action that the administrator has requested. And then they can go back and approve or deny at that point and say, okay, yeah, you're eligible, we're going to pay these units. Or you're not, you're still not, because maybe the units aren't eligible. And now we still have to deny those units.
Along that, the question being, would administrators have access then to cancel student requests? And for what you were suggesting, that would need to come from the student side, because otherwise you are just approving or denying. Those are kind of
Yeah.
the two options as an admin. But yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to say more about that, Mike.
Not cancel, the pending status would be the
Exactly. Mhm.
the go-to for that, because canceling would require the student to resubmit. Pending, we felt, and this was feedback directly from administrators, we were like, that makes a lot of sense, because then the student doesn't have to, the student just has to do what you're asking them to do.
Right.
But they don't have to then go back and re-request.
Mhm.
We want to keep that request open so that we can process it once they've completed the action you've asked them to take.
Mhm.
So
But pending currently doesn't exist. That's functionality that
not
we are
yet.
working on. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's slated for release in the third quarter of this fiscal year, which would be around March.
Great.
So you should see that coming.
Okay. I think those were all the questions in Q&A. Were there any others that Mike, Andrew, you wanted to address from chat or otherwise? I believe we covered them all. Right?
Yeah.
Great.
There was a good question that others may have around what can you do to activate the financial aid workflow? Please submit a request to support@cvc.edu. And then we will, usually what we'll do is we'll share the resources that we covered today so that you have those. And then once your financial aid director says, yeah, we're ready, let's do this, that's when we would actually enable it. So there's usually
And
some
get the accounts
coordination.
assigned. Get those
Yes, yeah.
counselors and financial aid accounts signed. Yes.
And that's the coordination that we have to work out with the
Yeah.
college. We can't just turn it on and then say, oh, it's there, you can use it whenever you want, because there is a new role that we have to assign. So we have to identify a user to fill that role. That's the counselor role. And then there's the financial aid director has to confirm that they or someone on their team will now kind of review these requests as they come in with counseling and complete those workflows. So that's all something we have to orchestrate, of us assigning that new counselor identifier. Some colleges use like a generic email where they might have a team of counselors. They're all logging in under the same account. Others will have maybe 2 or 3 identified, and then they'll kind of coordinate who processes which of the requests that come in. But that's definitely a new role. So we have to, identify someone to fill it. And then the financial aid team has to also be trained and aware of, hey, there's a new screen that they actually have to go and interact with to complete that aid workflow.
That's a great reminder. So if that is something that you don't believe your college is currently using, you would like to please reach out to support at CVC and we will work through with your college to get that set up. Right now, like I said, about half of our colleges are using that. So please let us know. What other questions?
That was a great one from Geneva as well. If a school can't add the units until the freeze, are students told that when they choose that school as their home school? Not currently, but we did build in freeze date functionality into the back end of this workflow. It's not turned on right now because a lot of colleges were kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure we could utilize that. But it's kind of stubbed in there from a development aspect, so we can enable that in the near future. I think Our product team is working on that right now with Parchment. Because there's two things we want to tell students around freeze dates. One is, hey, your request isn't going to get processed until a freeze date. And then the second is, if you're requesting aid for a class that you enroll in after the freeze date, it's not going to happen. So we want to set that expectation for that student, which we can do with freeze date functionality. So there is a freeze date screen in our system that we do have set up where we could populate a freeze date based on the home college's preferred freeze date. And then we could tell students who request before that freeze date, hey, your application or your request won't be reviewed until X date. And for students who enroll after that freeze date, we would tell them, sorry, it's too late. You know, the freeze is gone. And in that case, we wouldn't even bother the financial aid team or the counselor at that home college, because all those requests would come in after that date. We would just tell the student automatically. We're telling you the same thing your home college team is going to tell you. You missed the freeze date. We're not processing any more aid for this term, regardless of where you're taking those students.
Census date question. Did you see that one?
Yes,
Michael.
yes, I did. So census dates, we are that should get close to where it's consistent, and we will show a census date across all colleges. It will be the census date of the course at that college. So it might not align with your census date, but it's the census date for that course, which is typically what most colleges are interested in, because they're like, okay, I have my census, but this class might not even start until after my census begins because it's on a totally different schedule. So what is the census of the class the student is enrolled in, so I can know, have they remained enrolled and participated through census for those class dates. So we're providing it for the majority of classes right now, but it is another implementation step that we have to do to actually pull that census date from the teaching college. And there are a few colleges still left. I have to double check our numbers that we're not populating that census date yet. But the vast majority in production, again, today we were reviewing a staging environment. The vast majority in production are actually showing census dates for those classes.
Great point. And also pointing out that difference between us showing some data that was missing in staging today versus production. It's a great point. Other questions? These are great questions. Love seeing those come in. I think we've answered everything in the Q&A and everything in the chat. Anything else in our last few minutes here? Okay. I think we about covered it. Well, thank you all so much for attending. We appreciate your engagement and the questions. So this recording, as well as the slides, will be posted, and we'll send a follow-up email to everyone who attended the training as well. So feel free to share with your colleges. Thank you all so much for attending. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.